The air hung heavy with incense, thick and sweet, almost suffocating. Lee Funeral Home, a modest building on the outskirts of town, was a familiar space for the Hmong community, its presence both comforting and foreboding. Worn floorboards creaked under the weight of generations of grief, each step echoing with sorrow. Faded photographs on the walls whispered stories of lives lived and lost, their eyes seeming to follow you. It was a place of mourning, a sanctuary for the dead, and a temporary home for their spirits, where the veil between worlds felt thin. Tonight, the home held Tim Yang, his stern face illuminated by a single flickering candle, casting eerie shadows. Tim Yang, a man known for his sharp tongue and even sharper temper, had died unexpectedly, leaving an air of mystery. Whispers followed his name like shadows, growing louder in the dim light. Some said his heart finally gave out, burdened by years of bitterness and unspoken regrets. Others spoke of curses and restless spirits, their voices tinged with fear. His family, huddled in the front pews, seemed small and lost in their grief, their faces etched with a mixture of sorrow and unspoken relief, as if haunted by his memory. Tim had always been a difficult man. His anger, a simmering pot always on the verge of boiling over, had alienated him from most. He carried grudges like prized possessions, refusing to let go of past transgressions. His death, sudden and unexpected, had only deepened the mystery surrounding him. The funeral was a small affair. Only a handful of mourners came to pay their respects. The air thrummed with unspoken tension, the silence broken only by the priest's chanting and the soft sobs of Tim's widow. As the ceremony drew to a close and the last of the mourners shuffled out, a palpable sense of unease settled over the funeral home. The shadows seemed to lengthen, the silence amplified, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The air grew colder, and an eerie stillness enveloped the place, as if the spirits themselves were watching, waiting. Nightfall brought a deceptive calm. The funeral home stood silent, shrouded in an oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow all light. Inside, Tim lay still in his casket, his chest unmoving beneath the heavy brocade, as if the weight of the world pressed down on him. The only light came from the flickering security monitor in the corner, its eerie green glow casting long, distorted shadows that danced menacingly across the room. The night watchman, a young man named Tu, sat hunched over his desk, his eyes heavy with fatigue and a sense of foreboding. He glanced at the clock, the minutes ticking by with agonizing slowness, each second echoing like a death knell. The silence was unnerving. It pressed in on him from all sides, thick and suffocating. Tu tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling himself it was just his imagination, but the shadows seemed to whisper otherwise. But deep down, a primal fear stirred. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong, as if unseen eyes were watching his every move. The whirring of the security cameras was the only sound in the oppressive silence, a mechanical whisper in the dead of night. On the screen, the room containing Tim's casket remained unchanged, shrouded in an eerie stillness. Suddenly, a flicker of movement, like a shadow dancing just out of sight. Tu sat up, his heart pounding like a drum in the suffocating quiet. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes straining to make sense of the grainy image, every pixel a potential threat. The casket lid, Just a fraction of an inch, or had it moved? Or was it a trick of the light? He rewound the footage, his hand trembling. There it was again, a subtle shift that sent chills down his spine. The lid shifted ever so slightly, as if something inside was pushing against it, desperate to escape. Tu's breath caught in his throat. His blood ran cold, a primal fear gripping him. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was not alone. Something was watching, waiting. As the night deepened, the oppressive silence of the funeral home seemed to grow heavier, like a suffocating blanket of dread. Tu, the night watchman, couldn't shake the image of the casket lid shifting, a sight that gnawed at his sanity. His mind raced with dread and curiosity, each thought more terrifying than the last. With a trembling hand gripping a flashlight, Tu ventured into the dark hallways, each step echoing ominously. The beam of light created long, menacing shadows that danced on the walls, as if mocking his fear. Tu approached Tim's casket, his heart pounding louder with each step, the air thick with an unspoken terror. Suddenly, a faint whisper broke the silence, sending chills down his spine like icy fingers. He spun around, his flashlight sweeping the room frantically, but there was no one there, only shadows. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, and Tu realized it was coming from the casket, a voice from beyond. Gathering every ounce of courage, Tu reached for the lid, his hand shaking uncontrollably. But inside the casket was empty, a void that seemed to swallow the light. Panic surged through him as he understood the horrifying truth. Tim's spirit was not at rest, and it was seeking something or someone. As the whispers reached a fever pitch, Tu's mind raced back to the old Hmong rituals his grandmother used to perform. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and shadows seemed to dance at the edge of his vision. He had always thought them to be mere stories, but now in the grip of terror, they were his only hope. The forest seemed to close in around him, each step echoing with an ominous crunch. With trembling hands, Tu gathered the necessary items, incense, a small bell, and a piece of red cloth. The items felt heavy with significance, as if they held the weight of generations. The air seemed to crackle with energy as he began to chant the ancient words, his voice wavering but resolute. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the silence almost deafening. The spirit of Tim Yang materialized before him, its face a mask of anger and sorrow. The air grew colder, and a chill ran down Tu's spine. Tu's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood firm. The spirit's eyes bore into his, filled with a haunting intensity. He pleaded with the spirit, asking for forgiveness and peace, his voice growing stronger with each word. The forest seemed to echo his pleas, the trees whispering in response. The spirit's anger began to fade, its features softening as if the weight of its sorrow was lifting. The air grew warmer, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. A sense of calm spread through the room, and the oppressive atmosphere began to dissipate. The forest seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped it. Tu could feel the tension in the air easing, replaced by a profound stillness. The ritual was complete. The forest was now a place of peace, the shadows retreating. Tim Yang's spirit found its peace, and the funeral home returned to its solemn silence. The dawn light bathed the building in a gentle glow. Tu let out a long, shaky breath, knowing he had done the right thing. The weight of the night lifted from his shoulders. The night had been long and filled with unseen terrors, but he had faced them and emerged victorious. The first light of dawn felt like a promise of new beginnings. The echoes of the past had been silenced, and the restless spirit was finally at rest. The forest, once a place of fear, was now a sanctuary of peace. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. Thank you for watching.